And just like that,
Ugh.
we're live. We're back. We missed last week, but we're making up for it because we've got what our social media commenters are referring to as right guy as of late, Collin Johns.
Thanks, Thomas.
What's happening, Collin?
Not too much.
All right, where are you?
I personally call him. Sorry, Thomas, to cut you off. I personally call him the Highlander because there can only be one like true Rightsider, and he's the only one. And the only way you beat him is you have to cut off his head, like the TV show. You got to take him out. It's the only way.
Well, I'm just glad I'm on with somebody who plays volleyball who's familiar with the concept of setter and hitter.
Right, and right side, left side, and yeah, exactly.
I don't know volleyball well enough to understand the whole right side, left side, but I do know the idea of setter hitter.
Yeah, you're the guy that's just, you're behind the scenes, just calmly running the show. Dude, it's actually, I was thinking about that earlier. I'm going right into it here. Sorry, Thomas.
You're good.
I just trained this morning and I was like, dude, I got to get good at the right side because although I'm long and the left side's probably better, there's so many good left siders. I'm like, dude, I got to get dialed in on the right because I've played both on the beach, right? And the angles are different. The way you set up the ball on your shoulder, how long I can hang and chop, it's all different. And so I was like, dude, I got to get good. And I was like, dude, I got to be like Collin because he's the only one that really has just mastered the right side. Everyone else is fickle, just keeps like jumping back and forth with whatever partnership. Dude, it's so fun to watch you just dominate that right side. I'm obsessed with it now.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm glad that you could relate to it and bring some expertise from another sport. And definitely, I found my niche in the pickleball court, and now I have to actually learn the left side for mixed, which I think will make the right side better. But I have no plans on switching anytime soon to the left side in men's doubles.
Good. There's no need.
Yeah, well, you're like a true specialist, and I actually want to come back to that because I think generally it probably opens up options for you that. Because you've perfected it, like people don't realize. But we'll come back to that because I actually want to start with just like your background because I think most people know this, but you were a pro tennis player. You were on the ATP tour. That's where you met Dekel. But I'd love to just hear kind of like, okay, what was sort of your path in tennis, and then kind of the general transition to pickleball, the generic stuff. We need to figure out where he came from.
Yeah. So most people associate Dekel with Ben because they had the pickleball getaways business together. But I knew Dekel many years before Ben ever met him. And it was our family that got Dekel into pickleball. So it's kind of funny. So starting at the beginning, I grew up playing some other sports. I mean, just like Ben, we were baseball, table tennis, and eventually tennis. I started playing tennis when I was 13. And I was just obsessed with it. I wanted to do nothing but play tennis. And I ended up just devoting myself to that all through high school and training at the regional training center, College Park, for a couple of years. And then I moved to Florida to train more. And at that point, I was looking at some colleges. But because I started tennis so late, I really wasn't getting very many offers. I think I took an official visit to NC State. I went to West Point to see that school. So I was looking at colleges at that point. I had no plans to play professionally. I wasn't anywhere close to that. But the year that I graduated high school, they changed the rule where you could only take off 6 months in between versus it used to be a year. So that combined with the fact that the University of Maryland lost their men's tennis team the year that I graduated was kind of the perfect storm to make me not go to college because I probably could have walked on at Maryland because I knew the coach because that's where I practiced and I would play practice sets with the guys. I knew all of them. It would have made sense, but that was impossible because they got their tennis team cut. And then that combined with cutting the time down to 6 months, I basically had to sit on the sidelines, even though I was young for my grade. I graduated early and I was able to play for 6 months. And the next 6 months, I basically just practiced and kind of looked at different schools I could play at. Wasn't really getting any offers. And then I was playing some practice sets with a friend of mine locally who was having a little bit of success professionally. And I was just like, I kind of wonder how I would do if I played some pro tournaments. So I got ready for it. Starting in January the next year, I said, I'm going to try some futures, which are the lowest level tennis pro tournaments. That's what I did. And I got smoked in the first one and the next one and the next one. But I felt like I was close and I wanted to keep doing it. And I also figured that if I played for a little while, then maybe I get some better college offers and one thing would lead to another. But then I actually got my first professional ranking point that summer. And then after that, shortly after, I got my second one. And then it was always like I could see light at the end of the tunnel. I was like, all right, I just beat this player. I just got this far in this tournament. I'm gonna break through the next one. And I eventually got up to 900 in the world and had some very good wins. And 5 years later, I was still playing. And at that point, when you're at 900, you're not really making enough money to support yourself. So I decided to retire at that point and go and work for my old coach in Naples, Florida. And that's when Ben's like, you should really revisit this pickleball thing. Because up to then, I had refused to play. Like, I would hit with him to help him, like, train for US Open. But, like, I would tell him every time, that's a stupid sport. It's for old people. I will never play. I'm playing a real sport. And I devoted my life to tennis. So it was not like I was going to switch at the drop of a hat for this silly game that didn't really have a following at that time. It's not anything like it was now. So I eventually I gave in. I said, I'll give it another chance. And I was in Naples, so I had Simone and Kyle there, among other people. And I would train after I would play. I would work at the tennis academy, and then I would go ahead and practice. And I wasn't really playing many tournaments at that point. I played like one or two local ones. And then I actually got the assistant coaching job for Florida Gulf Coast University. I knew the coach from before when I used to train there. So I dropped the academy job because at that point I was working at a country club called Mediterra in Naples. So I had the Mediterra job, and then I had the FGCU job, and then between I would just train. And I kind of had my sights set on US Open, and I was training a lot with Simone at that time. She was with Prince, and she set up a conversation actually before US Open to put us in contact. She says, this is Ben's brother. He has a lot of potential. He has a pro tennis background. I think you should sign him. So she put in a really good word for me. I spoke to Curtis, and we actually verbally committed before I even played. But it did help that I made the semifinals of singles that year and lost to Tyson in the semis. But after that, I was able to sign with Prince, and that's what led me into the pickleball scene because I was able to travel to some extent. And little brother, he's like, well, you're not good enough to play with me quite yet, but I'll play a few tournaments with you. But of course, he was working with me. So I think we played 4 tournaments that year together later that year. And I had moved back to Maryland for a job at Baltimore Country Club because Ben knew the director there. It was supposed to be seasonal and then eventually turned into full-time. I had to decide whether I wanted to go back to Florida. And I was like, well, Ben lives in Maryland. My family still lives there. Even though I hate the cold, I'm going to move back and see if I can leverage the training. So Ben was very thrilled about that. We ended up winning 3 of the 4 tournaments together. The next year, we played about half. Or I guess it might have been the COVID year. I can't really remember now, but he phased me in slowly. We'll put it that way, where I was good enough to play a few tournaments, then half, and now this year it's everything. So that's kind of the whole tennis to pickleball journey. I guess in a longer sort of explanation.
No, that's all good. I totally forgot you were with Prince, but that was like less than a year ago. You were playing with the Prince paddle, right?
Yep, I played US Open just 1 year ago at the Prince. That was my last tournament, and I love playing with that paddle. It's a great company, and definitely they were talking to me about re-signing, and I decided in the end that Electrum was the best thing. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about the Paddle Tech Prince guys because they're an extension of Paddle Tech.
Yeah, I gotta say you had a pretty good advantage in that Ben's your brother, and you were training under Simone every day. I mean, that's probably as good as it gets.
Yeah, I mean,
intro, you're like,
yeah.
I mean, when people ask me how I got good, I'm like, well,
yeah, right.
Let me tell you all the natural advantages that I had built in. Like, if I didn't get good, I mean, man, that would be tough.
Yeah, wow.
The pro tennis, Simone and Ben, like the 2 greatest players of all time. And of course, Simone was an integral part of me learning how to play, and she used to beat the snot out of me in singles when I first started. So I won't lie to you and say that I always beat her because she used to beat up on me.
Dude, singles is very frustrating because it seems like, especially if you come from tennis, you think, I'm going to go in and dominate.
Yeah, you're very cocky about it. And, well, she kind of lowered the boom on me and Dekel because Dekel, he entered very soon after when I did, and we played our first few tournaments together because naturally both talented tennis players, but we didn't really know how to play, so it made sense for us to play together. But I remember one instance when we were in Atlanta at one of our first tournaments. I think it might have been our first tournament, and Simone beat him 11-0 in singles, and then she almost beat me 11-0 in singles. It was like, wow, we are no longer on the tennis court. Dekel looked like a sad puppy, and I was like, what is going on right now? I thought I was getting better.
Wait. So
Who
why
am
don't?
I? What do I do? What do I even do now? Right? You just question your whole identity. Am I even in? Where do I go from here?
Yeah, I feel like it was a little bit easier for me than for Dekel because starting tennis so late and being really good at baseball up to that point, I kind of had to suck up really being bad for a while. And I was losing to like kids and girls, and it was just really frustrating. So I'd gone through that once before, but for Dekel, it was like I've always been good at the sports that I play. This is horrible.
The struggle, yeah.
So how did you meet Dekel though? So were you just like playing against him in tournaments? Were you training in the same area for tennis, or like how'd that come about?
That is actually a funny story. I might just give you the short version, but we had the same housing in Vancouver, Canada. We were playing the Futures up there, and it sort of happened by accident. The people that we were staying with didn't even tell me or Dekel that the other one was going to be there. And to spare you all the gory details, the housing was definitely on the weird side. They were like Nazis about recycling, and they had somebody living in their basement. And we had a bonding experience, me and Dekel there, to survive that weekend. And we just liked hanging out, and we ended up traveling the next tournament together, practice together. And then shortly thereafter, I invited him to come to my house and train a little bit. And then we just hit it off, and he's been one of my really, really good friends throughout the whole tennis journey and also through pickleball.
Just band of brothers in a basement. Just, dude, we have each other. We got to grind.
Yep. You got to ask Dekel about that story at some point because he might give you the whole version. And we almost met our demise in that basement.
Well, so why don't you play singles? I feel like you're probably a nasty singles player.
Well, I used to play singles when I first started. It's easier for tennis players to adapt to singles. So, of course, right. I did play that, and it just felt like a small court relative to a tennis court, and I was still in great shape. And I enjoyed it more back then because my tennis playing days were over, but not long over. And I was definitely good. I gave Tyson a match on multiple occasions. Never beaten Tyson, but I have given him some very good matches. And same with Ben. I've had a couple match points on Ben one time, lost 11-8 in the third another time, and then lost at nationals in 3. So I could definitely handle myself on the singles court. And for a while, I guess I would have been top 5-ish singles player. But at some point, you want to kind of save the body. And I realized I enjoyed doubles a lot more. And I've had some back injuries from tennis. And last year it kind of flared up at a couple tournaments. And it was just a reminder of why should I sacrifice my body, especially because now it's on the first day. Do I really want to be sore and risk injuring myself for the events that really matter to me? So that would be the reason I've really cut out the singles. So I've agreed to have one tournament a year where it's a guest appearance, and I will go and take out as many people as possible. Just like last year, I played PPA championships, and I said no back draw, and I'm just going to try to take out as many people in the front draw as possible.
Who'd you get?
I took out Kyle McKenzie first round, AJ Kohler second round, and then I won the first game on JW. And then I ran out of gas, and he came back and beat me.
Yeah.
But secretly, you don't play singles because this is his master plan. He's like, look, I need Collin as fresh as possible to just be like the guy that's just waiting and like frothing at the mouth to just destroy everyone because he's healthy, he's ready to go, he's not worn out from singles. It's a smart play by Ben. Listen, Collin, I'll give you half of my singles money if you don't play singles. Just stay fresh for double.
Yep, and I definitely still keep Ben sharp for singles. I'll definitely play some practice games with him. So it's not like I don't play singles. It's just I don't play in tournaments.
Got it. So you're just a really good brother. We'll give you that.
Yeah, I'm his training partner.
Yeah.
You guys fight growing up because I have 2 boys that are 23 months apart, and they're almost. I mean, it's come to fist fights sometimes on the trampoline. If we're playing volleyball or basketball, because they all want to be like, "Who's better, Dad? Who's better, Dad? Who's better?" And I'm like, "You both suck, and I destroy both of you." To keep them humbled. But I'm guessing, like, even ping pong table yesterday, I took them to play at our office. I put my table over there, and they're just like fighting immediately. did you guys have that and kind of grow through it? And then now it like kind of bonds you to be even a better doubles team because we know you guys are. Is that kind of the process that it went through, or am I just screwed with my boys fighting all the
time? Well, the dynamic was a little bit different with me and Ben because I'm 6 years older than Ben.
Oh, okay.
So some people do forget that. And 6 years is a chasm when you're younger.
Yeah.
He lost at everything under the sun. Like, I don't remember him winning at a game until he was like a teenager, like anything. And I was not the older brother that would let my little brother win. And so the problem we usually had that my parents had to talk to me about is you have to let him win, or at least not crush him so badly to where he comes in crying every day.
And keep him motivated.
Keep him motivated. And he always used to hang out with me and my friends who were 6 years older than him. So he definitely had to be tougher and he had to play up. And there was one great story, and I think they did a feature on it at MLP, where there was a home run derby in our backyard on my 11th birthday. And he beat all of my friends who were like really good baseball players in the area. We were using these little tiny golf ball sized wiffle balls and with a little thin wiffle ball bat. And he hit 6 home runs over our little homemade fence in the backyard, beat out all of my friends. And then I had to show him up and come out last and win on my birthday. So he always had to hang in there with like older kids with me. He would come in crying from the backyard all the time. I beat up on him in ping pong. One of his favorite lines when he was really little is, "You're taking advantage of my shortness," because I would drop shot him. And table tennis, when he was like 4, 5, 6 years old, he couldn't reach it, and he just would cry, and he'd have to be sent upstairs. And but I think that it's worked out well in the end. He's definitely gotten tougher from that, and I think it's fair that I've never beaten him on the pickleball court in a real match, because I beat him in so many things growing up.
Yeah, credit to you then. And everyone make sure you know that Collin's the reason why Ben's so good. Yeah.
6 years and a lot of years.
Yeah, that's so good.
What do you think? So speaking of like tennis players coming into pickleball and just kind of the transition being pretty easy, assuming they played at a high level, and kind of the wave that we're seeing, particularly I would say like in men's singles. What's your take on that? And do you think that these guys who are, and the wave is coming, it's starting, I think we're right at the beginning. Do you think they're just going to like take over singles pickleball? And then do you think it's just a matter of time until they hone their craft and kind of move into the doubles as well? Or just kind of, what's your perspective on all that?
Yes and no. I think that you're definitely starting to see a lot more tennis players gravitate towards pickleball. They're seeing the prize money's increased. It's getting more and more popular. It's more accessible. So you'll definitely see more tennis types coming in. And singles, like I said, is the easiest way to adapt to pickleball. It looks sort of like miniature tennis. But at the same time, as long as nothing major changes where, let's just say, the paddle technology gets much, much better to where it's almost like tennis, I think that they're really going to have an adjustment period. And if you look at any of the top players right now, you don't quite realize how long they've been playing. So someone like AJ Kohler in doubles, for example, is considered to be a newer player, and he's been playing 3+ years. So he knows his way around the pickleball court. It's not like he's unseasoned. And certainly not saying that in a good or bad way. I'm just bringing to attention a lot of people view new players, quote unquote, as people that have been playing multiple years. So I think that trend is going to continue. Not that the new tennis players are not on their way, and they'll certainly be great candidates longer term, but pickleball takes a lot longer to learn than I initially thought and what Dekel initially thought. I mean, we took our lickings early on, and I had to learn a lot of different things and get a lot of tournament experience. And probably the single biggest thing in my mind is gaining experience against the top players, because misdirection plays such a big part. And if you've never played specific players, I mean, good luck playing Jeff Warnick for the first time, because you're like, he's holding it like a windshield wiper, and I'm just eating it every single time I attack his body. And if you don't have someone to guide you through or have the experience to lose to him a few times, it's very, very difficult. That being said, I mean, there's some great athletes out there on the tennis court that I feel like would be so good as soon as they started. And it's just a matter of time before those players come over and make singles much deeper. And then from there, they're going to transition to doubles. I just don't see anyone at this point with the depth we currently have taking over relatively quickly, unless we're talking about like Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, who are not going to waste their time at this point.
Why not?
They're like,
yeah, those guys give me like Federer, Nadal for like 2 weeks. I'm like, the guy would beat anybody. Like, but that's just me growing up, like worshiping them as the tennis gods that they are. I'm like, they'd be good at anything.
It's crazy because there's such a comparison with indoor volleyball too. It's like the indoor guys go sign contracts for over $1 million a season. It's all guaranteed. They've got the incentives. And then you got the beach volleyball guys who are like in the limelight in the US. We got all the TV time. We get the sponsors and it's like fun, but you make less money and it's not guaranteed. You got to earn it. And these guys are like, oh, bro, I touched like 13 feet. I could come over and dominate at beach. And you're like, cool, bro. Why don't you come over and I'll beat you without jumping because you've never played in the wind. You've never not had shoes on and on this weird new surface. You know what I mean? And the strategy around playing doubles versus like 6-on-6 or like this big physical indoor game, it's so much different. And the misdirection is still the number one thing for us as well. It's like, dude, I will manipulate your like shirt off with my wrist and how I carve the ball in beach volleyball compared to indoor guys that are like gold medalists come out and they just fail because they're like, you know, that's how I feel on the pickleball court, like a baby giraffe. I'm just like, whoa, you know, you're working them without even really trying because it's even though it's the same name or game and there's a lot of technique, it's so much different as well. And the misdirection and utilizing the elements, it's so much more of a strategy than these big guys think that, you know, in tennis, the wind still affects the ball, but not as much, you know, and then the court size and all those things. It's really cool to see the similarities in how that evolution happens where guys are like, yeah, I can go play pickleball and then you just get smashed. And the same thing, guys will play for like 6 years and then they finally get like a top 10. They're like, oh my gosh, the rookie, the new guy on tour. It's like, this guy's been playing as long as me. He just finally figured out how to get top 10. What are you talking about, rookie?
Yeah. It's funny to hear the comparison in a sport like that. I have no idea. I don't know beach volleyball nearly well enough to know that there's misdirection to that extent. So it's really interesting to hear that. And of course, I'm sure it's like any developed sport where you need some experience before you can even finish close to the top, let alone at the very top.
Yeah, the team dynamic is almost identical, right? The gaps, the different speeds in between an absolute smash of a forehand and then a dink, right? All those little speeds in between are so valuable, right? And then the leans where you see guy in the periphery if they're leaning and you can like expose it. It's all the same with what we do. And so it's just a matter of throwing a paddle in the hand, which is the hard part. Because I'm just using like, can I just put like can I make like the first paddle hand and have it just be my hand and I could just.
Well, Preston always complains that he gets in the path of the ball because he's like, I see a ball incoming at me and my first instinct is to put my chest in front of it.
Same. I'll just take it right off the shoulder. I'm like, you're easy. And I'm like, oh, I just got body bagged again. Dang it. I gotta use this thing.
Yeah, you got to fight that instinct.
Yeah.
It's more like sword fighting.
Yeah, exactly. So that being said, what's the number one thing as, you know, an upcoming Rightsider, when your slide and like counter when guys speed up is like, I mean, someone needs to do like a loop of everyone you've ever done to like a hip hop song. Dude, it's so sick. I want like a top 10 slide backhand. When you do that, did you just like figure out that getting your body out of the way was like the number one thing? Or did you go through a while of just standing there and like kind of getting midline and taking it? Like, when did you figure out that was such a like epic move? Did Ben kind of have that in mind, or did you just kind of figure that out through repping? I'm curious.
Collin, before you answer, so for anybody listening, I want to clarify what we're even talking about, because I actually don't know, but I think what you're referring to is like in a speed up, Collin will just take like a massive side step so that he can take like a fuller swing and kind of tee himself up for the next shot. Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
So he's smashing someone's speed up. Like he sees it ahead of time, steps right, gets his midline out of the way, and just backhand ooshes it down the middle. It's so fun to watch.
So that's what you're talking about, where someone's speeding up, usually from a cross court ball. So Ben's thinking cross court, that's the most common speed up. And it should be said that everything about my doubles pickleball game in men's was designed to complement Ben from the very start. Because when I first started, Ben's like, obviously you're a really good tennis player, great table tennis player. You have me, we're going to play together eventually. I need you to develop everything to complement me. And I was like, done. Like, I'll do that. Whatever you need, you tell me.
Yeah.
So that includes forehand dinking. One of the most important shots that Ben put his finger on is the slide backhand, so fading, because he's going to be playing the left and he's going to be covering middle with the forehand. Pickleball, as Ben likes to say, is not designed to be played 50-50. You should not be covering 50% of the court. It depends on where the ball is. And in my mind, the perfect team is a lefty-righty to where that could apply to both sides. But since we're both right-handed, Ben's going to take more of the court. It's just the reality of it. It doesn't even necessarily come down to that he's the better player. He is, but it's more of that's the way you need to cover a pickleball court. Because especially when somebody's speeding up, you don't want to have to guess forehand backhand, because that little split second throws your timing off enough, makes you late enough to where their follow-up is going to be much better. So from the very start, Ben's like, I want you to work on this shot where you slide to the right, you sit on your backhand, you know it's going to be a backhand, and just leave anything to your right. Because if you're far enough over, anything to the right side of your body is going to go wide. So there's really nowhere to go. And he developed that with his other partners as well. So like Anna Lee, he's been teaching her how to do that. It's just nice that she has like the nastiest two-hander on the planet.
Yeah, right.
So
seriously,
it's actually something I also learned from Simone, and not that she taught it to me. It's that when I was playing skinny singles with her and I would try to speed up at her, she would do the same slide with the two-hander. And I was like, that looks like a good shot. I'm going to try that. And I kind of combined that with the one-hander that Ben taught me. And of course, playing with Ben, you get a lot of opportunities to hit it. And it's really just about shifting your body out of the way so that it's not a target. And the target zone is on a side that you know it's going to be on, namely the backhand, because the backhand just covers so much area. And it really just presents no open court to the opponent. If Ben keeps the dink low enough and they're trying to force a speed up, I've got my corner covered with all backhand. So good luck trying to get it through. And if you go middle, Ben's sitting there in the forehand. And the whole idea of that is designed to wind up to Ben's forehand, whether it's the first ball or the second ball. So in an ideal world, I hit a clean winner on it if they speed up at me. But a lot of times the guys with good hands will get the next one back. But then the reply will go directly into the jaws of Ben's forehand, which is where we want the ball to go. And then it's good night. And that's exactly where we want to live. And if you want to try to roll the dice and go through the middle to Ben's forehand, good luck with that as well. So I feel like our slide system is one of the hardest to beat. And it's not that I'm the world's best counterpuncher, but if you give me a backhand and I tee it up and we have Ben sitting there in the middle, it's a tough proposition. It's definitely one of the harder systems to beat in the game, I feel like. And I'm glad that we started out by practicing that.
It's basically like a Michael Jackson moonwalk with a sick backhand finish. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. Yeah, you just flow out of the way and counter. Dude, it's so sick. I love that how you talk about the ownership of Ben taking the middle too, because it's the same in our game. It's like if a guy's jumped over me and I got the tailwind, like there's a crosswind in my corner, we call it like the hot corner, right? So I'm in the trenches here and I just have to own that middle no matter what scenario happens if the ball's coming from that area. And that leaves so much more ability for us as a team to process what kind of ball they're going to give us, because we already know who has what ownership, versus like the constant guess, or when you play with people that don't understand the angle and the trajectories, they're like, well, that's my middle. And it's like, well, dude, if you just let me own this at all times, we would both be more confident and make a better decision long-term and get ourselves out of these rallies or speed up rallies that happen, because we have a job to do and we have ownership in each scenario. Because if it crosses over, it changes the angle, that all adjusts. But I love that you say that, because I do that same thing. I go, hey, my middle, no matter what, even if the ball's like almost hitting his high left shoulder, I'm still owning that middle, because we can count on that, and then we can make a better play as a team. It's cool to have people understand that a little bit better, even just through pickleball. Like, no, it's not like a 50-50 game. We got to adjust and move, and there should be ownership with that left sider being a right-hander for sure. Like, it's like a 70-30.
Oh yeah, that's so interesting, the parallels that apply on that as well. And I'll tell you something that also helped me on that with that mindset is playing and teaching platform tennis at Baltimore Country Club where I worked. So I taught and played that for 3 years, and it's exactly the same size as a pickleball court. And there's chicken wire around the court, which you can play it off the walls, making it sort of like squash. But the parallel that I really found was the simplicity of the shot selection and whose ball is whose. Anything over your partner's left shoulder is your ball. There's no deviation from that. Unless you're a lefty righty, and even so, it depends on the position of the players. You can't deviate, because even though it might not look like you're putting your team out of position, you are. And if you just stick to something very concrete like that, and you have a system, if you're not reaching for that one ball to the center, your partner's so sure that ball is his that it just makes for a better system overall.
Yes.
And it's interesting to hear that applies to volleyball in the same exact way.
Yeah, the same thing. It's like, oh, let's minimize this effort and confusion and maximize, ownership and then control of that scenario. It's like, dude, the outcome is significantly better when we just have that structure, right? And of course, there's the random audibles where, maybe you can poach one and pick it off because the angle's a little bit different, but that's such a good thing for people to hear and understand. Is like, look, you need to establish your structure and your team chemistry too, because like you said, Ben's like, dude, I need you to be this for me so we can maximize our potential. I think that's something that I've done too with every partner. Some guys like, I'm better at the right side. I'm like, sweet, dude, I played both and I'm not scared. I'll go over to the left, and I'll deal with the left side. Or this guy's like, dude, I'm really confident on the right. All right, I'll go over on the right. And I think being able to systemize that for your partner and elevate together, that's so huge. So it's cool that you guys train that way, like specifically, because we do the same thing. It's so cool.
Yep. And definitely something where you don't want indecision. And if you remove that entirely, I feel like that's part of the reason why Ben and I play so well together, is we know whose ball's whose at all times. And when he plays with other partners, once in a while, you'll see, it doesn't happen often because they're great players, but sometimes they take a ball that he wants. And I feel like I do a pretty good job of getting out of the way, which is part of the system. And it's not, again, because I'm that much worse. It's because we have a system and we don't deviate from it.
That's so rad. It's cool because, sorry, Thomas, I'm feeling it right now. The first time I played with like a really elite, like I played a few Olympians, like coming through the ranks, and they would kind of be like, oh, here's the young kid with the energy, and he's bringing all the fire, and they would pick me up and bring me into the main draw. And I went through a couple, but then when I landed on this one named Jay Gibb, he is like very, very similar to how you play, Collin, where he makes all his shots. He's super consistent. He's even keeled. He's not like super high or low. He brings fire, but he's not like going to be in your face all the time. And what it did for me is it took me from being this guy that was just like all energy, and I was like a roller coaster. I was unstoppable or I was in the trenches, right? It helped me like level out. And it's cool because you can see like you and Ben are both kind of similar in that way, but with the way that your body language and your control is so like calming and balanced that it's really fun to watch, because I've personally seen and had a partner like that where it was like, oh, okay, now that like calmness and trust level is so dialed that I get to actually experiment and be super creative, because I know my guy's just going to do his job. He's going to be there. And then also game time, like that, I can't remember what match it was. It was like, I think it was set point in either one of the finals or maybe like a quarter semi in the last event for the PPA. You hit an Ernie, I think, for a winner to win the set. I can't remember. Was it that or to save one? And I was like, there it is, dude. It's like, he's just the steady, calm, the dude that just puts in the work, and then creative highlight reel. It was really cool to see, but I think that's something for listeners to really focus when they watch these matches, to see how like structured and stable of a player you are. It's so fun. Like for me, that's like one of the coolest things to watch. Somebody who just like over time just does their job and plays at such a high level that it's like almost they don't recognize it, because you're not flashy. You're not like yelling and screaming and talking to the crowd a ton. You're just like, you're there the whole time. It's so cool, dude. I love it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And I feel like I'm at my best when I could tell Ben, just let loose, go for your shots. I got you. If you miss, it's fine. I'm going to be a backboard over here. And I've told him that in certain matches where he's maybe a little passive, he's not bringing energy. I'm like, go attack, go light them up. I got my side. Just feel free to do that, because you need somebody who's a little bit more aggressive, more creative, and somebody who's just never going to miss.
Yeah, just green light. That's what my guy told me. Green light, bro. And I'd go back and bomb serves when normally I'd be like nervous to keep it in. And then we go on some like 6-point run, and I'd be like, Green light, bro. I love it. Thank you. Thank you for being that like foundation for me to be able to be creative because I'm not worried. That's huge.
Never apologize when you guys go on rants like that. That was
Thomas is just chilling there for
I know,
what was
like,
it, 20 minutes?
you guys just my mind was blown like 5 times over. I don't. Okay, I've never played a professional sport. Well, I guess I've got I got my 2 pro wins. I like to bring up all the time in pickleball, but I'm not somebody who thinks that in depth or strategically about the way I play the game. So hearing you guys even just use words like design and system in terms of like the way you're thinking about how you play the game, it kind of like opens up a whole nother reality for Collin. What you said and what Ben said, the fact that pickleball is not designed to be played 50-50, or it's not designed for each player to cover 50% of the court. That alone, I think many people need to hear. And I think if they were to sort of like adopt that philosophy, would make a massive impact on their game right off the bat.
Yes, absolutely. And like I mentioned, in my mind, I think eventually all the teams will be lefty righties. Similar to in platform tennis, almost all the top teams are lefty righties because it's just a massive advantage on so many different levels. And actually, I have an article coming out in Pickleball Magazine next month on why you should always stack the lefty. So given that I'm not lefty, I can't do some of the things that I wish I could. So like Ernie's are easier, shake and bakes, things like that. So in that case, you could play it more so 50-50 because you can do the same thing in the mirror image on each side. But if you're not lucky enough to have a lefty, like why would you play it 50-50 when the geometry of the court dictates that the ball will come to the outer half and the middle part of the court? So many rallies end up in cross-court dinking exchanges. So based on the geometry of the court, unless the ball's high enough to really get it down to the cross court, there's no way that they can attack the length to that outside half. So you really need to shift. And especially when Ben's dinking his backhand cross court, why would he hang out in his corner when he should be covering part of my side just simply based on the incoming angle of a would-be attack? Right. So something as simple as shifting properly plays into it. And if you have me as a lefty doing the same thing the other side, he should be more on his line. I should be covering part of his half, just based on proper positioning. And definitely something that I feel like as the pickleball coaching manual becomes more mainstream, that'll be something that's just taught to everybody. And certainly something that I teach as a coach at clinics or to clients. I was like, no, you are responsible for more than your half, especially when the ball is here or here. And I think the more people recognize that, the better player they're going to be.
Yeah, agree. Because that dude, the righty lefty thing is the same thing in beach, right? You got 2 guys that can either go on 2 off a pass or fake and set, but they always have that strong side towards the middle and they're always facing the angle. It's the same in pickle, right? Like all those angles balls that I can get because my arms are too long. And so I get in the way of guys' forehands and I'm like, sorry, that's not mine, but I can get it. And so like I cut it off sooner than they can get to it. A lefty, that same thing, dude, it's like a superpower because in every scenario, it's the same thing as having Ben just waiting, licking his chops for that middle ball that's a little bit too high, right? But then it doesn't like balance out because it's always an option with a lefty. So you're like, oh crap, we got to really get good at playing the ball at the highest part of the net. You got to try to work the backhand, and then you're just like, trying to overplay, hitting balls in the net. You're getting screwed. You're like, that's a hard part to play against a righty lefty. It's such a power. I love that.
Yeah. And we played a lefty righty in the semis of the last tournament. And I don't know if anyone noticed, but that Ben's corner got played a lot, like probably more than I can ever remember. And
who was that? Who was that against?
It was against Pesa Tioni and Daniel De La Rosa.
Oh, and yeah.
Part of the reason they're able to do that is that there's a lefty in front of Ben. And lefties are annoying in pickleball because it changes the vulnerable spot. So normally the chicken wing is on right hip, right shoulder with right-handers, and with the lefty, it's left hip, left shoulder. So it kind of changes where you like to hit your combos to. And Pesa did a really good job of countering Ben's attacks. I mean, he, of course, got him some of the time because he's a great attacker, but I felt like simply by him being lefty, he slowed Ben down enough to where they had the freedom to dink to his corner probably more than they normally would be able to.
Dude, I don't even, you're speaking like basically another language right now. I bet like 25% of our listeners are like, this is brilliant. And then 75% are like, I have so much to learn about this game.
There's a lot of games inside the game.
Dude. Then the long play, right? You're like, sometimes you're okay with playing something, knowing that near the end to close out a match, you're going to expose the counter of what you've been setting up over time, right? Everything looks the same. Maybe we're dinking middle, or we're third shot. We're dropping middle on a righty lefty, and then in the end, let's just go pin. Let's just go pin side on either guy. Maybe there's a cross breeze. Let's really leverage that the last two attempts, and that's usually when you close it out. And guys are like, "What just happened?" Oh, yeah, it's so fun.
Yep. A lot of times, because I don't attack a lot, I'm usually saving my favorite combos until later in the match when I want to hit them. Now, executing them at that time when I'm sort of cold on them is not always the easiest thing, but if they don't know it's coming, then it really gives me a little bit of an advantage. So because I don't attack as much, I feel like people read my attacks less well, because I've dinked the ball 100 times cross court. And then when I finally do pull the trigger, it's like it came out of nowhere. And that sort of happened towards the end of the fifth game, I felt like. And I got some more attackable balls, granted, but definitely they work better if you don't see them all the time. Unless you're Ben and somehow he finds some angle that nobody else saw.
Yeah, the manipulator. Yeah, he finds something nasty. You're like, oh, of course he found it.
Yeah,
awesome.
Of course he did again. Or somehow you counter perfectly, and he's like, oh, yeah, I was ready for that one too.
Yeah, I set that up. You're like, son of a...
Yeah, I swear. I don't just say this because I'm Ben's brother, but he hits shots that nobody else even would see. And I still don't know how he does it all the time. And definitely he's very familiar with the left side of the court, and he's seen the highest level for a long time, but still, sometimes he hits shots. I'm like, how did you even attempt that? Let alone make it.
Yeah, right?
You guys are in such a unique position in that, I mean, you guys are very much like architects of the game. I mean, you're at the forefront at the highest level. And just based on the way you're talking, I can tell you and Ben are constantly thinking about new ways to innovate and create new strategies and push the limits. And Ben's hitting shots that people don't see. You're playing a side of a court in a way that nobody else is. And you're creating these new systems where you're, to use your own word, you're designing these new systems. And you're kind of like trailblazing where pickleball is going right now, particularly from a doubles perspective, men's doubles. I wonder if, there's any way to like, will everybody sort of just fall in line and start doing what you guys are doing? Or is there some other sort of like counter system that somebody's going to come up with down the line? Or is this the way the sport is moving? I mean, it's going to be interesting to see just like how it all develops as new talent comes in and new perspectives come in. So
yeah, and it could come down to something as simple as the equipment changes, or the ball, the paddle, something. The kitchen line gets moved back. It could be something that none of us saw coming, or it could just be eventually some new great tall player comes in, and now you can't dink because he's 7 feet tall. Yeah,
oh
Casey,
my gosh,
you have hope.
That's my hope. I pray every night. I'm eating my vegetables.
Oh yeah, the 7'4" wingspan. One of these days, it's all going to click, and you're going to be like, Ben, this kitchen area is no longer available.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I always wonder what Kevin Durant would be like on a pickleball court, because there would be no kitchen anymore. I'm sure he could touch the net with his paddle.
Get the hamstring flexibility, of course.
Well,
just like, this is adorable.
Is it 7 feet? It's 7 feet, right?
7 feet.
Yeah, it's 7 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of yoga. I'm getting
depends on how flexible he is.
Yeah, if he's
exactly.
flexible. I mean, you only have like 6 inches to begin with. I mean, with Casey, I've never hit with you, but I would imagine dinking to get the ball on the ground is quite difficult.
Yeah, that's my goal, is to like get really, really good at the controlled volley in the air dinking, so I don't have to like. That way I can like pressure, right? It's all about like, can I give you stress without really trying to speed up a ball where you're like, ooh, he got that one. And I'm not really doing anything, but just getting it in the air. And then hopefully they feel like they need to overplay a little bit, and then they'll end up in the net or too high. And then I can kind of play the game. That's my goal now, is just get there. But it's crazy. Like, you guys winning so many in a row. I had the same thing on the AVP. We went 4 in a row, 4 in a row, 5 in a row, like 3 years in a row. And it was just like everyone's focus is on you and how to beat your system. And so you're constantly, I'm guessing this is why Ben and Collin do this, Thomas. And in my mind, it's, hey, we got to kind of stay ahead of the curve here because guys are going to start seeing patterns. And so we've got to have the ability to show that same pattern, but have a few like A, B options out of that pattern versus what's been working for so long because guys are going to get used to it. Right now, it's like when you play someone over and over again, you get more confident, you start to get calmer, and you start to see and recognize those patterns sooner. So for sure, that's what we had to do was like, all right, we got to get ahead of this curve. Let's experiment maybe how we serve against teams, or in this scenario, let's attempt to push this here or use this angle there or this different speed so that guys never get too comfortable, right? And then at the end of the day, it's just, you got to be a winner, right? I mean, like you guys are developing this, but at the same time, you guys know that in these high pressure situations, you're probably the most comfortable in those. And that's how I always felt. I'm like, we're fine. You know, we're down 3 points. They have game point. I'm fine. I believe, you know, and so we always came back and won those. But I think that's what I'm guessing is that you guys are just developing just to stay ahead of the curve because that's the natural trajectory. You guys are going to watch more film. They're going to get guys that are statting stuff. They're going to be prepping. And like we would have practice where we have like, all right, you're Collin and you're Ben. I need you to do these things in this scenario over and over and over until I get so comfortable that now I can counter and start to fight back. So it's like, that's just it's cool to see that progression and to fight it off.
Yeah, for sure. And you definitely see that coming to where people are trying to problem solve, whether it's switching partners or implementing new strategies. And AJ and Riley in the last tournament did a great job of kind of changing the pattern that we've used against Matt and Riley. And it's also interesting that Matt and Riley tried to change up the pattern by switching sides. So in the first tournament, they started with Riley on the left and Matt on the right. And the next tournament, they had Matt play the left pretty much the whole time. And they were problem solving to try to figure out how they could make that work. And then we played them again in Austin. They played straight up. So it's not like from lack of trying that they're not beating us. And certainly they can get hot and hit some great shots and from both sides of the court, but they're trying to figure out what that pattern could be to beat our system. So it's a war of systems in a way, because at the highest level, everyone can do a lot with the ball. But whoever has the higher percentage game plan is usually the one who wins. So I thought playing a team like AJ and Riley that we don't normally play, that are two great players, they did a good job of trying to hit some shots to make us uncomfortable. But like you mentioned, Casey, what really won us that match is the confidence to execute under pressure, since we're always in the gold medal matches. Yeah. Even though we were down 8-3 in the fifth, I turned to Ben and I said, we're good. We can execute right now. And we found a game plan and a target that turned out to be good for us. And it's harder to slam the door than people think. And if you're used to slamming the door, it definitely makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. You can feel that. You're just like, I would do the same thing and be like, dude, I believe, like, we're fine, you know. And that's something that a lot of people, you don't see that, because those are the little whisperings in timeouts, or, you know, after a ball is dead and you're shagging. And it's like, dude, we're fine. Let's green light this now. Go. Ben, you're okay. Unleash the chains, bro. I'm here for you. Now you just go attack.
Yeah. Even if you're not playing your best too, because I don't think anyone would have said that Ben played his best game in that final. But he found the shots when he needed them, when it was important. So even if you're playing badly, I feel like when you're used to winning, you expect to play your best when you really need it.
Yeah.
You mentioned, were you just throwing this out like sort of like as a random example? You mentioned like the kitchen line being moved back. Has anybody suggested that seriously? Just as a quick aside.
No, I was just throwing that out there. There's no movement in the PTA inner circles that we must move the kitchen line back. I was just throwing that out there as just a random thing that maybe no one would even consider right now.
Right. Okay.
Fake
just
news,
want to make sure.
They're raising the net 6 inches. They've done that to volleyball. We're going to put it at 9 feet. We're like, what? Like all the time.
Yeah, Ben and I like it exactly where it is right now. So we're going to be proponents of keeping it that way.
Yeah. All right. You were talking about like equipment and how that might be able to change the game. I mean, you know, you and I were talking at Dreamland the other day, just kind of about paddles and, you know, which brands are pushing the limits, which might be illegal. So do you think that there are Like, do you think, or maybe I could phrase it like this: are there any equipment changes or innovations that you think would be within the limits that could actually change the game quite a bit, or make a big impact? Or are there examples of that that you've already seen?
Yes. So some of the paddles now and in the past year or two have gotten quite a bit rougher. The paddle technology across the board has gotten better, and certain companies have been ahead of the curve. And certain ones, not to single anyone out, have gone on probation for making paddles that are over the limit, including my sponsor, Electrum, before I was with them. They had a bad batch of paddles that were
You,
testing
well,
over the limit.
you came in and you straightened them out, so good for them.
Yeah, I had
Listen,
to
guys.
lay down the law.
Yeah, right.
But certainly, in my mind, no foul play there. It was a bad batch, and they adjusted it. But there are paddle companies. My point is, there are paddle companies that are pushing the limits as far as the friction goes, and that makes a big difference because you can start to do things with the ball and create angles that you're not used to seeing. And it's not just that you can snap your fingers and start to adjust. So if balls are falling in that you're used to going out, you can't adjust on the fly that well. And now you have to start to cover things that you're not comfortable with, and it throws off your whole game. People might say, well, it can't help that much. But it does help that much more on the mental side because you start to second guess, is that ball going to go in? Is it going to go out? Am I positioned properly? And in my mind, there is a perfect amount of friction to have as far as like the limit goes. And if you put too much friction on a paddle, people are going to get too good at attacking, and the points are going to be too short. The dinking is going to be more obsolete. Not that it'll disappear entirely, but you'll see a lot less of that and a lot more flips and combinations. And some people might say, oh, well, that might be good for the hands battles and the entertainment of the sport. But to me, I think the points are going to be too short. And there could be adaptions to that to where I'm wrong on that. But I feel like we're right at that threshold where the points are already pretty good because you want some dink rallies, and people complain that sometimes they're too long. But to me, it kind of builds the tension, especially at certain parts of the match that are already tense. And you really start to see, is this touch there under pressure? And some people it's good, some people it's not, and then other people they get twitchy, they speed it up, and that makes for cool exchanges. So to me, I feel like we're right at, or maybe dial it back very slightly, maybe 5%, 10%, to where you still have that element of slow play. And then you also saw some evolution in the past couple of years on the serve with the spin serve. And I was a proponent of taking that out because pickleball is kind of unique that you can't win the point so quickly. And you see more of the longer drawn out rallies. So those are a few things that I feel like would be good to take hold of right now so that it doesn't go in the wrong direction. Because if it starts to look more like table tennis where people can just roll anything with crazy spin, I don't think long term that's good for the rallies of the game.
We did that in beach volleyball. We used to play on the indoor size court, which was massive. It's 3 feet bigger. So they took a foot and a half off the back and each sideline in beach because they wanted to create more rallies because guys were too offensively powerful and the court's too big. Like you couldn't stop me. It's like putting us on, a 24-inch net. You're like, dude, I can drive and hammer everything. I don't have to dink. Why would I dink? And so they're like, all right, let's make the court smaller to create more rallies. Because long term, it was better for TV time. It was better for the spectators. They want that anticipation and they want the buildup of a point, but also have the power and the execution still there. So it's crazy because when I play with a paddle that has more grip, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like I'm a whole different player. Like guys are hitting in drops and I'm like attacking a third shot drop that is like really low and it has top and it's catching. And I'm like grabbing it and just like flicking it off to the sideline on like the 10-foot line. And I'm like, dude, this is such a difference between a paddle that's, super slick and then one that has the grip and the texture. It's crazy. So I think, that's an evolution that I'm glad you guys changed. The serve, that whole thing was gnarly. It was like everyone was throwing like Texas tornadoes at me. I'm like, dude, this isn't even like fun anymore.
Oh yeah, because when you add an element of randomness like that, because eventually you're going to be able to hide the serve better than they can read it, and at some point you're just guessing. And to me, that's not a good thing because it's not about skill. You can hit a really good topspin serve, and they can see it coming, but that requires skill. Versus, yes, you can practice in your basement how to spin the ball, and that's why they took it out in table tennis, where it's like it's impossible to read what the spin is, and now you have to show the ball in table tennis. You have to toss it, ball up a certain amount.
Yeah.
And I think that's where pickleball should be personally. And some people disagree, but that's where the PPA has taken the pros, and I think the rallies are better for it. But also, like you just mentioned, and like I spoke about briefly, there's a certain thing when you add that friction where the players coming in are so shocked that you can attack that ball, they can't adjust their mindset. It's totally different. It throws off everything because they're like, no, that shouldn't be possible. Like he's attacking a ball that is unattackable, quote unquote. And whether that's a good or bad thing is a different conversation, but it can't be argued that it changes the game, not just in a physical way, but also in a mental way.
Right. Agree. Yeah, it's stressful. Like kitchen line, they always like fault. I'm like, bro, I'm 4 inches from the line still, just because I know you always look at my feet.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, I have like this whole document of stuff we were going to talk about, but then you just blew our minds for like 55 minutes straight. So I don't even know what to end with, but I did want to ask you, and this might seem kind of boring to some people, but I think it's interesting. We've talked a lot about like your game, why it's so unique and what you're seeing that others aren't. But one thing I've noticed about your game is that on your returns, again, people are going to might think this is boring. The nerds are going to like this one. Like, what are you thinking about on your returns? Because I feel like similar to like a free throw, like a repetitive free throw routine that you see in the NBA, you hit the same return every single time. There's nothing fancy about it. And then you get in there and then it's almost like just this involuntary action for you. What are you thinking about on returns, and what can people kind of like learn from the way you approach them?
So return of serve specifically?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say part of that is just tennis habits die hard. And in tennis, you have to be able to replicate the same motion over and over and over. And having played so many years of tennis, it's probably easier for me to replicate the same thing over and over. But it's actually something I've been working on recently on the pickleball court, where I'm trying to get my returns a little bit consistently deeper, also going to a little bit of a flatter return, maybe even topspin return. Because if you give the opponents a lot of slice, backspin, they're going to have more topspin on their next shot. So taking that away by hitting a flatter return, and not necessarily a harder return, because that robs you of time to get in, but at least hitting it flatter to where you don't have so much topspin coming at you on the next shot is something I've experimented with recently. And then as far as direction goes, being really disciplined with the game plan on who we return to. So there's a cool Facebook page I'm sure you've seen with the pickleball stats. Jim Ramsey's running that, and I've actually been in contact with him a little bit. And he posted the amount of returns that we hit to Riley versus Matt in the Austin final. And he's like, why was it so lopsided? Was it because they wanted Riley to take all the thirds, or did you guys decide before the match to hit Riley all the returns? And I said, well, that's an easy answer. We hit Riley every single return, except we hit one to Matt like once in a while, just to see if, because he was iced, he hasn't hit one in forever, if he would miss one. But the only reason we deviated even once was for that reason. And we just agreed ahead of time, we are hitting every single return to Riley for XYZ. And as long as you have that as part of the game plan, it's relatively easy to execute. It's not like anyone's going to be bombing serves to the point where you can't at least put it on the half of the player you want to return to. And if you decide that's a better option in that particular instance, you'd really need to stick to that. So I feel like I'm pretty disciplined with what our game plan is. And if that means returning down the line because you're on the stack, where you have to deviate from that, then you need to. But there's always a game plan that we have, and it's not just done randomly. We don't just hit left or right just because.
Yeah, for sure. Dude, I love that, because that consistent return over time too, even if you were to throw, we do the same thing. It's like we're going to serve this guy the whole time. And then we're going to throw one, we like to call them wrinkles. I'm going to just throw in a wrinkle here. I'm going to throw one short to the left sider, see how he reacts, because he's been cold. He's in a rhythm setting. He's not been passing or attacking. Now he's going to overthink it because it's like, oh, it's my one chance. I haven't hit one of these for a while, right? So it's like this new feeling. And even throwing different speeds at the guy that we're serving over time. If you're returning to Riley and it's like that same flat one over and over, and then you give him one that's like a knuckleball, it's like, even though he's good enough to handle everything, it's just enough to maybe disrupt time, just enough to get a ball that's an inch higher, and then Ben puts it away. You know what I mean? Like throwing in those little wrinkles, like I love that stuff because it's as a team and having that system. Like, hey, we're going here we're going to go 5-1, Riley, and then we're going to go over to Matt. You know what I mean? Just because that pattern is, although they might not know it or they do, it's still real, and that wrinkle just throws people off, even at the highest level. That's the fun part, dude. I love that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I got him.
Exactly. And to Matt's credit in that match, I think he made every single one of the ones that we hit to him. So he was still ready. But we definitely purposefully threw a couple randomly to him just to check to see if he was ready.
Yeah.
And I feel like our background, me and Ben's background in pitching from baseball, comes into play where you don't always want to throw them the hard stuff. I mean, in a 2-0 count, they're expecting a fastball. If you throw them a changeup, they're probably going to be out in front. So
yeah,
same idea on speed differential and pickleball or where you return to.
Yeah. I'm always like, if I'm not the guy getting served, I'm just like constantly in that mindset, like, I dare you to serve me. Just so I was like angrily ready. So if they serve me, like, I'm going to make you pay, because it's going to come. Some guy's just going to lean the face and just chop, and I'll be like off balance because I'm not expecting it. So I'm always like, I dare you to serve me. Let's go right now.
Yeah.
Got to stay crisp. I love those little nuances throughout the game of like the wrinkles and the different systems that you use. It's like the same thing. I just wish I was better at it.
It's just interesting for me to hear how many parallels there are. So I'm sure that when we finally meet in person, we're going to just have endless things to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Dude, it's so fun. I know. I'm like, why do you do that? Oh, I know why. Okay.
Yeah.
I know.
All right. I think if I were a listener, I'd be like, this is one of the best episodes, especially if you like playing and like thinking strategically about the game. This was great, Collin. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, we got to jump. We're over. This is a good episode.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's been holding his phone. I'm feeling bad. I'm like, Collin's holding it. We got to give him a tripod with a little phone holder. Like, my arm is
not
tired.
That tech savvy. I've been switching hands the whole time. I'm glad you brought that to attention.
Put the arm on the knee.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you both for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, this was sweet. Thanks, guys.
So fun. See you guys.
See ya.